Good evening. There we go. All right, we have the official go ahead now. All right, so I'll start again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. 大家好. Welcome, and thank you for participating in this virtual gathering to commemorate the life and legacy of Kristofer Schipper. I'm David Mozina, along with Elena Velusi of Loyola University Chicago and Liu-Jing Yu of Harvard University. We are your hosts for this event. There have already been dozens of written tributes to Professor Schipper posted on the websites of various Taoist studies centers in Europe, Asia, and North America. Today, we as a field gather in a live setting to remember Professor Schipper. We remember a teacher, a mentor, and a towering scholar who, directly or indirectly, impacted every single one of us who studies Taoism. We remember a visionary who, more than anyone else, created a sense of ourselves as an international field. Today, we share these remembrances because fields of study, especially young fields of study such as ours, should mark their founding masters, their zushi, and pass on knowledge and appreciation of them to the next generations.
Thank you, David. So again, thank you all for coming today. It's wonderful to see you all here. This event was organized by the Global Taoist Studies Forum, a new virtual venue seeking to foster a sense of global community for scholars of Taoism. And if you're interested in it, you can definitely send us an email and we will make you aware of any future events that we are organizing. We're based in North America, but we're hoping to really be global. And also by the Society for the Study of Chinese Religions, an international scholarly society dedicated to the study of Chinese religions, and the publisher of the Journal of Chinese Religions. The recording of this event will be made available on the Society for the Study of Chinese Religions website, the link of which is posted in the chat. I think Jing Yu will post the link in the chat. So the website has several various things. There's also a page of written remembrances of Professor Schipper there already, if you want to go and read them. And there's other events that we hope to publicize in the future. Today's event will feature short remarks by several of Professor Schipper's colleagues and students. Then we will open up the floor for informal remarks by anyone in the audience. So any of you who wants to share a few words about their experience of working with Professor Schipper or a friendship with Professor Schipper is free to share them in about 3 minutes tops. Finally, we will break out into small chat rooms of 5 or 6 to try to foster more informal sharing, as would naturally occur among pockets of people if we were meeting in a real place, which hopefully will give us a sense of community. But before that, we will begin with a few lighthearted yet important words from Professor Schipper himself. The following informal video was taken by Professor Liu Xuan at a 2015 conference in Assois, France, in honor of Professor Schipper's lifetime work on Taoism, which was organized by Professor Franciscus Verellen and Professor Vincent Coussard. Please watch after Liu Jingyu provides a brief translation of these remarks. So Liu Jingyu.
尊敬的各位老师、各位朋友，大家好！欢迎大家来参加我们道教研究学界这次为道教研究泰斗施周仁教授举办的线上纪念会。本次会议由国际道教研究论坛和中国宗教研究协会共同举办。我们将会为本次会议全程录像。会议结束之后，我们会把录像上传至中国宗教研究协会的网站，以便让未能参加的师友观看。我们首先将邀请几位施周仁教授的同事和学生致辞，然后将邀请所有与会人员自愿发表感言。不过在开始之前，我们一起来观看一段施周仁教授的录像。此录像由刘迅教授提供分享。David?
Mm-hmm. Can everyone see that? Elena, can we see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
etc. We should write our history, that's sure. But it should not be my history. It should be this with all of us, because what I'm going to say is my vision and others will have other visions. We should write our history. It's important.
I'm sorry, I'm being informed that we have no sound. Is that correct?
Oh, I was hearing
have
the
sound.
sound.
We do.
Oh,
We had sound, yeah.
I'm sorry. Let me begin from the beginning again. My apologies.
Etc. We should write our history, that's sure. But it should not be my history. It should be this with all of us, because what I'm going to say is my vision and others will have other visions. We should write our history. It's important that we do it. But it's too early, because it's not one altogether. We see perhaps that in each village now, in Holland, where I reside most of the time now, each village has its Tai Chi Chuan club. While the first time I did Tai Chi Chuan in Paris was in the garden, Luxembourg Garden, I got a circle of people around me and said, Monsieur, vous êtes danseur à l'opéra? Honestly. So we have come a long way, and that's glorious, but at the same time, Taoist studies are still somewhere on the outside. We are not the mainstream. And the revival of religion in China has awakened lots of ambitions by all kinds of people.
So thank you for that, and thank you, Liu Shun, for this wonderful video. And as you could see, we could see a lot of the people who are in this Zoom room today were in that room in 2015. So sometimes impromptu clips like that of moments like that capture so much just in a couple of minutes. And Professor Schipper tells us that we should write our history, but it should not be my history. It should be the history of all of us, because what I am going to say is my vision, and others will have other visions. We should write our history. It's important that we do it. And Professor Schipper continues and reminds us that Taoism has always been in the mainstream of Chinese culture, but Taoist studies still remain somewhere on the outside, not yet mainstream in our academic cultures. But we are going in the right direction. He calls on each one of us to contribute our talents to the history of our field, which has yet to be written. And so I think with that wonderful introduction of Professor Schipper, we will start actually calling on our speakers, our invited speakers. So now we would like to invite Professor Brigitte Baptandier of the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique in France to say a few words. Brigitte.
Thank you so much, Elena, and thank you for inviting us. And hi, everybody. For me, I would say that Kristofer Schipper not only had an exceptional, of course, knowledge of the Taoist texts, but having received them by initiation into the Taoist Chan family who had adopted him to transmit them to him, he had an intimate, almost emic knowledge of them. Thanks to his ritual, technical, and also anthropological training, he had acquired this orthopraxy, which made him being recognized as a Taoist on the field. Rick was interested in the implicit meaning, which is the red thread of the discourse. He liked words and their sciention. I remember his maietics when translating a text. His marked silence in front of a word was the most evident sign, the very clue that an entire universe was there, hidden to be explored. I believe that this search for meaning leads to a capacity for universality, which is this dizzying meeting point in ourselves with the other. It is certainly for this reason also that the ballads of the South the Nangguan music, of which he published several recordings, fascinated him, not only by the voids left in their notations, marking the controlled breath and the rhythm, but also by the suites of modes of timbres, Schipper, and of sequences, which allow to construct the grammar of their transformations, as it is also the case in processions and in rituals. He loved the voice bent to the requirements of an exact archaic pronunciation of the Minnan language he spoke so perfectly. He knew the fragility and the urgency of the transmission of this practice, now almost forgotten. I do remember Tainan, where the Nansheng Shi played every night at the Baoshangtadi temple, singing ancient romances of courtly love. I do remember our inviting them in Paris in 1982 with Cai Xiaoyue. I do remember Fuzhou, his house in the hills, his Bagua Belvedere and the small temple he had built there, in which people spontaneously, Zheran, began to come and offer incense, as if attracted by an obvious presence, without having to be informed. His last project, called Ai Shan, was about the grotto heavens, Dongtian, the blissful lands, Fudi, that is, the Taoist cosmology and also ecology. So, how can we not think that he's gone for this heavenly hike, Yunyo? Thank you.
Thank you, Brigitte, very much for those lovely words. Next to speak is Patrice Favard of l'École Française d'Extrême-Orient and Renmin Daxue in Beijing. Patrice is here with us now, but he pre-recorded his remarks, which we'll play in a moment. Patrice, would you like to say anything at the beginning of your remarks, or just shall we play them? Patrice, are you there?
Maybe just go ahead and play.
Yeah, Jingyu, can you play? Yeah, great, thank you.
Oops, there's no sound.
Yeah, Jingyu, we have. Yeah.
I would like first to thank Elena and David for this online memorial. I had the privilege to know Kristofer Schipper for some 50 years. I attended a lecture of him in 1967, and this was the starting point of my interest in Taoism. All of us belonging to the great Taoist family are mourning the great master of Taoist studies. Our father passed away. But the difference between a master and an ancestor is that the former one was ordained. And thanks to his ordination certificate, he will ascend to a special place in heaven called Tianzao. The divinization of Taoist masters is at the core of Taoist theology, but it receives very little attention from the academic circle. As you know, the ordination certificate is in two parts. The yin pin is burnt during one's ordination ceremony, and the yang part during the funeral. This is Kristofer Schipper's ordination certificate that I photographed in his temple in Fuzhou. It is reproduced in my book, Aux Portes du Ciel. I will soon publish another book about the divinization of Taoist masters because I collected in Hunan province hundreds of statues of Taoist masters who became local gods. For myself, I plan to ask the sculptor Kong An Guang from Chemin Sandu in Xinhua district to make a statue of Kristofer Schipper and to consecrate it through the Kaigong ritual, and I will put it on my altar. I hope this could be also the occasion to make a film. So, Kristofer Schipper, who inspired the work of so many scholars, will be by my side until the day I will join him in the Taoist paradise. Following Master Schipper's example, I can imagine that the next revolution in Taoist studies will occur when scholars will also become Daoshi.
Thank you very much, Professor Fava, and for these wonderful words. And now I want to invite Professor Vincent Gossard of the École Pratique des Hautes Études in Paris to say a few words. Vincent.
Yes, thank you so very much, Elena, David, and Jingyu for organizing this. This is really moving. 3 minutes to talk about such an extraordinary person is really a challenge. So I'll just say a few words. I've joined the community of Rick's disciples, students, and friends later than Patrice and Brigitte, but still being part of that community has been the best part of my life. And that's one of the many things I'm so grateful to Rick is to having allowed me this opportunity to join this fantastic community. As I wrote in the online Remembrance, maybe the first word that comes to mind when talking about Rick is generosity. He has just so much to share, and he spent his whole life sharing, sharing his time, sharing his ideas, sharing his books, sharing his works of art, sharing his money, sharing his meals, sharing his house. He's been outpouring with things to give to other people all his life, and until the very end he was still teaching informally. That was not on the program, but late at night he would gather some of our students, d'école pratique, and talk about his new project. That was until March last year, March 2020, just a year ago. And then the COVID pandemic put a stop to that. And he was talking to me about how he longed for this to start again, and that, well, never happened, so sadly. One of the results of the generosity is that there were so many projects, right? The Daozhong project and then the Beijing project, and all these projects, of course, resulted in major publications, but there were also community buildings endeavors that were so successful at creating groups and a dynamics. Some of these projects are still unfinished. Brigitte mentioned the Dongtian Fudi project. It's still he had so much to say about this, and he was writing about this. And I hope we can publish posthumously some of his work in this. He did not publish his field work in Taiwan either, and he was really planning to do that, and that so sadly will not happen either. But if I still have a minute or so, rather than sharing old memories with friends, I would like to say a few words to the young scholars who are in that virtual room and who have, for some of them, probably never had the chance to meet and talk with Rick. So maybe what we can tell them is an introduction to a sort of guidebook that might be called How to Read Kristofer Schipper. Because if you have not had the chance to talk with him, you can still read his work, right? And maybe we can give you some introduction to some methodological guidelines about how to read Schipper. So 3 things. First, read the languages. Brigitte mentioned how good he was at languages, oral and written, and how local different languages were important to him. His English was brilliant. He wrote a lot in English, but he also wrote very important things in French, in Dutch. His translation of the Zhuangzi in Dutch is really important. Of course, Dutch is not exactly easy, but it was at least knowing that it's there and it's not in another language. He wrote a lot in Chinese, things that are only in Chinese, not just translation of his English work in Chinese, but he wrote a lot directly in Chinese. There are some things in Japanese too, right? Languages, pay attention to languages. 2, intuitions. It was outpouring with new ideas, sometimes provocative. It was more provocative when talking than when writing, of course. But then still, there are provocative ideas. It just opened doors. There are lots, even if it's earlier publication, there are a lot of just doors open to a wide land that nobody has been to, right? So take this not as a definite truth, something you can just quote, but a door that can lead you to an unknown country and unknown continents. Follow these intuitions and try to prove them or disprove them, which is just as well, but just, you know, take this as hint to go further on your own way.
Oops, you're muted.
Vincent, we can't hear you.
You just muted yourself.
There you go.
Yeah,
Thank you.
very unintentionally. So third and last, humanistic drive behind all of his work, informed by his own life experiences, starting during World War II in Amsterdam, in extremely difficult situation that he has written about, but it's not published. But his own family story is striking. And this has inspired him his whole life. It completely informs his love of local societies, local culture, differences, right? Plurality of languages, ideas, religion, and his deep-seated rejection and even hate of grand national ideologies, be they religious, ethnic, nationalistic, or whatever, and his love for local life, local society, and difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent, for those words. Next, we have Professor John Lagerwey of l'École pratique des hautes études and the Chinese University of Hong Kong. John?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to get together very early on when Master Chen was visiting Paris in 1977. At that time, Patrice Favat and I and 2 girls, Brigitte, not Batondier, sorry, Brigitte, but Petit Archambault and Cécile Lyon in Schipper's garden for Lao Tzu's birthday, did a ritual together with Chen Rongsheng on Arya Shu, okay? And from the course that Chen gave, the 2 courses actually, one on the Gongda and the other on the Daochang in that year, spring of 1977, we learned that the first thing that must happen at the beginning of every ritual is to think of one's masters, Guwangben. It's a way of reminding ourselves of our roots and our foundation. And that, of course, is exactly what we are doing today. As I wrote in Taoist Ritual in Chinese Society and History, Schipper's courses hit me with the power of revelation. What revelation? First, that what I had learned at Harvard was an elitist, Neo-Confucian version of Chinese history and was false. Second, that like politics, and that joins what Vincent has just said, all religion is local. His article on the local god of the soil was particularly what set me in motion on that particular trajectory. I am particularly grateful to him for introducing me in my first year in France to the Lao Tzu Zhongjing and the Huangshu Guodu Yi. From the first, that is the Lao Tzu Zhongjing, I learned that if in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit alone, in Taoism, it is a Shenzhou, a continent of spirits, embodiment of unity within multiplicity. The same multiplicity so visible in local Chinese religion and in Taoism itself. The variety of local religion frees us from the authoritarian monotony of the centralized Neo-Confucian state orthodoxy. As for the Huangshu Guodui, it taught me two things. First, that Taoism is a cosmic religion in which the order of the Tao is created by the union of yin and yang, as Schipper liked to quote, yi yin, yi yang, wei zhi dao. Second, unlike the theology-based religion on which I had been raised, with its focus on belief, cosmology-based Taoism insisted on practice, on ritual. Thus, the two obsessions of my own subsequent career, Taoist ritual and local society, both developed out of what I learned from Schipper in my first year in France. I will conclude with a footnote on Schipper's Dutch heritage. The Dutch love idiomatic expressions that somehow summarize the anonymous wisdom of the people. Among his favorite French expressions I still use are à quelque chose malheur est bon and le mieux est l'ennemi du bien. And in Chinese, two expressions of Chinese cosmology, the one I've already mentioned, yi yin, yi yang, wei zhi dao, and the other, gu yin, bu sheng, gu yang, bu zhong. So thank you.
Thank you so much, John, for those wonderful, wonderful remarks. 现在我们请国立政治大学的李凤茂教授，李教授，请。
好，我认识施教授，是在我博士毕业，那时候我先做了丹道的田野调查，还有福州的禅和派，然后呢，在台北呢，我就接到电话。这个施先生说，能够跟大家见见面，所以我去了。那么他提到他为什么要做一件很特别的事情，就是做道藏研究、道教研究，为什么要去做田野调查？然后他提到说，他在中央研究院民族所做研究的时候，他说如果我在研究还是看道藏，那我何必千里迢迢从巴黎到台湾来？但是有一次，他就听到外面有那种送葬的那种音乐的声音，他跑出去看，他就认为说，这个道教是 living Taoism， 就是说它是活的，跟生活还是在一起的，所以他就决定说要离开研究院的研究室，然后呢，由台北，然后就到了台南，开启的道教研究，除了是经典外，必须要有田野调查的经验。他跟我讲这几句话意思，他就说，他说你在台湾，当然你做丹道研究，做禅宗派的研究也非常好，但是。那时候他是指的是台南的这些道长，这些道士，他做了一些道教的仪式，事实上对于了解道教，不管是魏晋南北朝，或者是宋元以后，他都很有很大的帮助。所以呢，我就想起后来我到巴黎做访问的时候呢，他就给我看的一些照片。那个照片呢，就是在屏东这一带的王教的照片。然后他更讲过一句话，他说：“你看，我们在外面看到的都是只有一些正统，但是没有看到在道坛里面做的王教的仪式。”所以他提醒我，他说：“如果你将来你回到台湾，那时候呢，因为我要从巴黎回到台湾的时候，我就赶到屏东。”参加一场王教的活动，所以我到了屏东以后呢，我就进入了王教的教场，然后我才了解说，哦，真的是不是只有外面的这些有形正统，它的最核心的有两个场所，一个是在王府里面，一个是在王教的教场。虽然那时候王教的教场比较简单，屏东的。后来因为有了这个原因呢，所以我就想去台南，因为这个是 施教授可以说他一辈子在那花的田野时间最长的。果然，我就可以在台南几个重要的送王教的地方看到的王教的这个仪式。从这个经验呢，他说，如果你有了这个田野的经验，你再去看道藏，你就会找到一些很有趣的东西。后来我就发现他在比如说道法会员等等，他就发现了这个神霄的这宋传礼。我就因为施教授这样的提醒，所以后来我就从这个神霄宋传礼一直在往外拓宽，包括台湾的，包括中国大陆，就可以证明台湾的王府的这些礼僧所做的仪式，原来很多都是在道教里面都是由道士所做的。所以我相信施先生他那么早他就注意到了这种神霄的宋传礼，这个眼光对我来讲就很有教育的意义。所以后来我的学生做道教的，我几乎一定带他们去做田野。那么这个是属于王教的，甚至包括在庆成教谢土的这个仪式，乃至于在庆成的仪式里面，我们就可以看到的所谓安五方真文。而安五方真文，我们在魏晋南北朝的道经里面一样的可以找到源头。所以他就，我记得很清楚，那时候陈龙胜道长在玉龟道山的时候呢，我们都到台南，然后施先生也特别从福建到了台南，然后他就当然那是一种比较正式的黄鹿斋，然后他就提到，我就提到过去他提醒我们，除了是用的经典的文本的 text， 我们也注意到了这个历史的文献，但是呢，他要强调说，如果没有田野的实际的观察的经验，甚至于自己能够参与观察，能够上坛，也能够有点唱的经验、练的经验，他说你对道教的理解常常是有一点想象力，而这些道士啊，像陈龙胜道，他所保留下来的，这是一个很有意义的一个仪式。所以我觉得施先生他已经归道山了，但是他对我的影响，乃至于我来带着我的学生用这个方法去做道教。所以施先生在台湾开始他的田野，而他在田里面所形成的这样的一种榜样，对我来讲也都是很有启发，对台湾的我的学生辈也都很有启发。所以施先生啊，他对于道教研究方面呢，他真的有他的创建，在这边特别对他有一种怀念跟感恩的心情。谢谢。
谢谢李教授。Next on our list, we have Professor Maruyama Hiroshi of Tsukuba Daigaku in Japan. Maruyama Sensei.
大家好，我跟希波尔教授第一次见个面，的是想起来是1985年12月，香港中文大学召开了一所道教音乐与仪式的国际研讨会，当然呢，施教授把这个 A Study of 不虚，就是不虚考这边论文用国语念出来的，当时我还在研究生，我是旁听的，当场有参加的是拉古文教授啊 ，Michael Sasso， 还有丁鹤香教授，钱耀廷老师，重要的人物都参加了。那我那个时候小小的一个研究生，看到了这么多的，还有陈国虎教授也参加了，大家都听不懂他的那个 苏州常熟那边的方言。那补习考呢，对我的影响非常大。它重点是考中这个补习的历史嘛。那从那个魏晋南北朝开始讲，还有佛教的因素、文学方面的因素也都讲了。但是呢，对我来说是最影响最大的内容是它的结论。它的结论呢，按照这个南宋的金允中的理论，就是仪式的 inner and outer， 就是内外要统合。当时有很多那个天台山那边的学派，只重视这个里面的身体里面的功夫。那他那个时候发表的内容是，里面跟外面内外要统合的时候的媒介是什么？是音乐，就是 music。那我听到这个，就是 music 就是仪式的一个本质性的一个深层的一个功能。所以呢，这个我第一次了解到它的最重要的一个理论的部分，所以对我启发非常的大。我还想起来他的声音，他很多作用内外这样，一定要统合。这种理论呢，对我来说是真的启发很大。我现在还在继续几乎每天都看这个金允中的那个文献，那个像金灵宝大法他有金允中有他的特别的那个很深的一个理论的框架。那个时候呢，施教授已经掌握好了他的要点。这个感觉我越来越深的，他的说话施教授的说话是对的。所以呢，我觉得这个非常重要。对我来说是那个时候27、28岁的我来说是非常的影响非常的大。第二个是重要的是他的台湾的道教文献这个文章大家都看过吗？这个台湾文献里面，作为一个所有的他收集到的台南为中心的道教文献的目录，这个东西对我的这个35年来的研究上是一个非常基本的基础。他是开拓者，我觉得我自己是跟随者，走在他的后面。他当时这个台湾的道教文献的那个序文，他的那个论文的部分也讲得很有意思。但是呢，我后来的人呢，也是有现在的情况跟他当时的情况不一样的，就是现在大陆很多地方的可以抄本可以看得到，所以现在可以对照啦。那我发现那个浙江那边的浙江省那边的很多地方的还有很多地方的手抄本跟这个台湾文献里面的一些考古方面的抄本可以对照，还有那个历史以来的一些明朝的或道藏里面的可以对照。所以他1998年到东京来的时候呢，跟我很大的那个鼓励的话，就是说台湾道教内容非常丰富，我们继续要做深入的研究。所以我这种鼓励呢，对我来说是非常重要。讲完了，谢谢。
Professor Hiroshi, thank you very much for your words. 谢谢你。We now move to the next speaker, Professor David Palmer of Hong Kong University. David.
So thank you so much, Elena and Jinyu and David, for bringing us all together today. It's such an incredible honor and a pleasure to be with all of us together as we remember our master in his ascent to immortality. So I met Kristofer Schipper during my first year of graduate studies in Paris in 1995. I took his Saturday morning seminar at the École Pratique des Hautes Études in the dusty old Salle Marcel Mauss in a corner of the Sorbonne. Schipper was a legend in Taoist studies, and for most of the year, I followed the seminar trying as best as possible not to be noticed. To me, he was a strict advisor, but I owe him everything in my career. His seminars were dazzling intellectual performances. He was perhaps the last true sinologist. No matter how Taoism is approached, taught Schipper, embodied ritual practice is the key. The embodiment is both individual and social. This unified approach transpires in Schipper's masterpiece, The Taoist Body. The narrative starts with the festivals of the people and ends with the mystic flights of Zhuangzi. Chapter by chapter, the book advances seamlessly in a steady progression from the practices of the common people to the training of the Taoist masters, to the cultivation of the body, and to the realms of the immortals. Most accounts of Taoism treat these dimensions as distinct fragments, focusing on one to the exclusion of the others. But the Taoist body takes the reader on an initiatory journey. The connections between the chapters reveal as much as the content of each. To the young scholars here, I tell you to read it again and again. The book is alive. The Taoist body, as portrayed by Schipper, is a living, immortal body, not just the individual body, but the social body. The social body of Taoism is a living body. And this is, to me, the most important lesson to be gained from Schipper. Regrettably, he never published a detailed ethnographic account of his field research in Taiwan, but he took into himself the life of the Taoist lineage and community he studied. And through him and his passion, the texts he taught, the histories he narrated, and the articles he wrote come to life. Contemporary academic paradigms love fragments and detest essences. These paradigms would lead us to question whether something called Taoism really exists. Schipper was no peddler of a simplistic Taoist holism. He was rigorously empirical, historically minded, attentive to difference, to the local. But for him, the priests at the emperor's court, the masters and mediums in the remote villages, the celestial masters or the Western Taiji practitioners, all are expressions of a single living Taoist tradition. And he never ceased to insist, this tradition is the true body of China, its Juti. This was the controversial proposition he put forward. Step by step, piece by piece, he encouraged his students and the growing community of Taoist studies through their research to give flesh and life to this account of China's Taoist body and to its centrality in China's history from ancient times until the present. This is China's yin body, the body of the lowly people in the shadows, the invisible overlooked source of China's life, in counterpoint and resonance with China's yang body draped in a Confucian and later socialist robe. This is the path, the Tao of Taoist studies that Kristofer Schipper called on us to follow. Thank you, Master Schipper.
Thank you, David, very much. Last, we have Professor Franciscus Varela de l'École Française d'Extrême-Orient. Franciscus.
Thank you, David, and thank you both for taking this wonderful initiative. Remembrances of Kristofer Schipper regularly mention his talent for orienting research in the field of Chinese religion in promising directions. His inspired intuitions guided many excellent projects around the world. And for another trait we all remember him is his generosity. Not only did he generate more ideas for new research than a lifetime of his own relentless work could realize, but he was happy to share them with others, with students and colleagues, and to see them bring these ideas to fruition. In some ways, the conception seemed to matter more than the ultimate realization. A favorite remark was, "We're not here to say the last word on this or that subject, but the first." Understanding the impact epigraphy would have on Taoist studies, Rick founded a journal dedicated to inscriptions. It was called Matériaux pour l'étude de la religion chinoise, in Chinese, Sanjia Wenqian. Our friend Vincent Gossartier was very active in that enterprise. Some of you may never have heard of it. When I once mentioned to Rick that this valuable but rather discreet publication merited much wider circulation, his surprised reaction was, "Whatever for?" Schipper's immensely influential work, as we've heard, on the Taoist liturgical tradition, based on his field research in Taiwan, circulated among specialists in the form of a long typescript, but was never published. I was introduced to Rick Schipper when I was a graduate student at Oxford, doing research on the literary aspect of the writings of Du Guangting under the guidance of Glenn Dudbridge. My other teacher was Piet van der Loon, a member of the steering committee of the European Taozang project initiated by Rick Schipper. And Piet van der Loon felt that my study would benefit from a fuller appreciation from the ritual dimension of Du's universe. Kristofer Schipper very effectively provided me with the immersion in that subject at the École Pratique des Hautes Études in Paris that proved invaluable to me, as to so many of his students of Taoism. After my return from the US to France in 1991 to take up a position at the École Française d'Extrême-Orient, Rick invited me to join him in the task of editing the research produced by the Taozang project. As each of us was fully occupied with other obligations, this was a daunting proposition. The period of our most intense and fruitful collaboration fell in 1995 to 1997, when we were both fellows at the Institute for Advanced Studies of the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences. During the year of my residence at the Institute in Wassenaar in 1996 to 97, we regularly met at Rick's house in nearby Leiden, working our way through the entire canon, taking stock of what had been done and what remained to be done. At the end of the day, the discussion usually continued in the kitchen and over dinner. By the end of the year, we had come up with a map for the long road that still lay ahead of us before the publication of the Taoist Canon, Historical Companion to the Taozang. After that, our paths crossed more intermittently, which is why I feel doubly privileged to have had a long telephone conversation with Rick between Amsterdam and Hong Kong a few weeks before his death. In retrospect, I believe he anticipated that we would not meet again. His cordiality and generosity were undiminished, as was his curiosity about things Chinese. China's alterity was an endless source of delight to Rick, providing him with unending opportunities for discovering alternate models of thought. And I think it also rather attracted him as a foil for his own deeply original personality, which never failed to surprise and was always larger than life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Franciscus, for those words and for remembering the Taozang project, which is so foundational for many of us who study Taoism. And then to end this section of our event, we have a recording of Professor François Picard of the Sorbonne, who will say a few words and share a wonderful musical performance with us.
François Picard, professeur d'ethnomusicologie, Sorbonne Université, Paris. Schipper, 是我的老师，我是他的弟子。上海道家协会会长施小金给我说 ：“Picard， 你的老师是导师，所以你也是导师。”我一直没有回答，我就是音乐人，一个人。
Thank you, Professor Picard. Thank you all. Let's see if we can, before we continue, can you put the screen on me?
You are on.
Okay, so thank you. Really a heartfelt thanks to all our speakers for your memorable remarks and your contributions. This is, your words are important, especially for those of us who did not know Professor Schipper as you did. Now, we'd like to open the floor for about a half hour or so to anyone in the audience who'd like to share any experiences with Professor Schipper or thoughts on what his life or work means to him or her. Please raise your virtual hand indicating you would like to speak, and we'll call on you in order. When we call on you, please unmute yourself and feel free to speak whatever language feels most comfortable. And please limit your remarks to about 3 minutes or so, so more people can speak. Jingyu, you want to say some more?
非常感谢各位的致辞。接下来我们将邀请各位自由发言。如果哪位室友想要发言，请点击屏幕下方的举手按钮。我们将依次邀请各位发言。您可以使用任何您觉得舒服的语言。由于时间关系，我们希望您可以尽量把发言时间控制在3分钟左右。谢谢。
Okay, the floor is open. Lena?
Yeah, I know Paul has to leave, so if he wants to go first.
Okay, well, thanks, Elena and Jingyu and everybody for putting this together and letting me speak before I turn into a pumpkin. Just 3 quick stories to sort of share what I feel about Rick. The first is when I first met him when I was a graduate student at Princeton, he gave a talk at Penn organized by Nathan Sivin. I asked a question, and as soon as the talk ended, he came over and said, "We have to talk," which sort of shows his generosity and warmth. The second story is when I went to Paris in 1995 for a Taoism conference, which Franciscus and Lin Fushi had organized. And that's when I first met Vincent and realized how little I knew, pitifully little I knew about Shenzhen Taoism. But I also went to this conference with trepidation because there was a risk that my son Philip was going to be born too early. And in fact, he was born early, so I had to leave. And when it was announced that Philip had been born, the first person to go over and shake my hand was Rick, which shows that, you know, he knew what was really important in life, which was not scholarship, but it was family and good health. And I'll always remember that. And the third memory is in 2014 when I accompanied my wife Shu Fun to the Zürcher conference in Leiden. And Rick was there and he hosted us with a very nice lunch. And he spent most of the time talking to Shu Fun in Southern Min, or as we rebels here call it Taiwanese, which sort of reflects what Brigitte was saying about his love of the language. So I just wanted to share these 3 memories and also my gratitude for everyone for being here and honoring his memory. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. And really the floor is open to anyone else who wants to share remembrances like this. So you can just put your hand up, your virtual hand up. Doesn't look like so far there's anybody who wants to speak, but please, this is very informal at this point. So if you have any memories in, you know, and please just share them.
May I speak up a little bit?
Of course.
Please.
Thank you. I wanted to recall Rick's generosity to me as a graduate student in Paris in 1984. My daughter was born just south of Paris, and our first visitor was Rick. And he arranged a ritual in his household altar to announce my daughter's manye to the gods in the presence of my mother and my mother-in-law, who had come to visit with us or see their first grandchild. And of course, his teaching throughout that year was incredibly important to me and changed the direction of my research. His introductions to Chen Rongsheng and Cai Xiaoye, who Brigitte mentioned, were made our year in Tainan the following year after the year in Paris an incredibly rich experience, and I'll never forget that. for many years, he came to visit us when we moved from Tainan to Fujian. And we went together to the great Baosheng Dadi temples outside of Xiamen, where he immediately saw the incredible importance of the epigraphy there, listing the hundreds, if not thousands, of temples through many centuries that had joined the Fenchang networks that were all listed in these great steles in those temples. The amazing thing about him was that he could spot these amazingly important things out of a mass of information and move it to the next level in terms of generalizing the significance. So his inspiration continued through many of his ongoing projects, and I really hope that his colleagues and successors in Paris can keep the Beijing project moving forward, the Sacred City project, and the Aishan project that Brigitte mentioned as well, because Beijing is one center, but the Dongtian Fudi are everywhere. And so there's much to be done still with following through on many of his great suggestions. So thank you all for giving me this opportunity, and for all of you being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken, for those words. Lovely. We have
Terry is
Kleeman
next. Yep.
online. Yeah.
Hi,
Terry,
everyone.
go ahead.
Well, I think I should follow Ken because I believe my year in Paris was the year after his year in Paris. And while he was in Tainan, I was in Paris living in John's apartment while John was in Taiwan that year, I think. So you can see how everything ties together with Rick at the center. Like everyone, I wanted to just reiterate how much Rick was really a Lao Shi, someone who took a personal interest in his students, which was quite unusual for me coming from Berkeley, I have to say, and was a very welcome change. I don't have a really great anecdote or something, but what I did want to say more than anything, in a year reading through the Wenchang Hua Shu with Rick, the transformation for me was understanding this text as a representation of living religion. That's always what I had been hoping to find, but somehow Rick was just able to see that through the text in a way that nobody had ever shown me before. And I think what I learned in that is reflected in my first book, in all of the annotation, and has guided me through the rest of my career. So here's to Rick.
Thank you, Terry. That's wonderful. Now we have Wang Gang.
Okay. Thank you, Elena, David, and Jingyu for organizing this. I first met Rick in 1999 when I just joined the Chinese University of Hong Kong. At that time, I told him that I was a Ming study person. I was interested in Ming Taoism, and he encouraged me a lot. He said in Chinese, he said, 太重要了，现在没有人研究明代道教。And many years later, when I published my book, The Ming Prince and Taoism, and Rick actually emailed me in a long message encouraging me. And Rick has been my inspiration of my research throughout all these years. And his article on Zhao Yizhen is the first on Qingwei School. And my current project actually is the study of Liu Yuanran, and Liu Yuanran actually was Zhao Yizhen's student, and I regard Rick as my 老师, so I think this is kind of a 缘分, and this I would like to use this opportunity to thank thank Rick's inspiration and his generosity. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for those words. Next, Vincent would like to say a few more words. Go ahead, Vincent.
Thank you. Yeah. Oops. Problem. Sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. I was not really planning to mention this, but hearing Ken and others recording or Rick cared about them and their families, I have a small anecdote on the picture. Can you see that on the screen?
Yes.
Right. That's Rick performing a ritual. Right. That's not in Tainan. That's at my wedding, and the anecdote is that that was a very a very beautiful July evening near Paris, blue sky, quite warm weather. And of course, Rick was invited and he drove a long way. I think he drove from the Netherlands actually to be there at my wedding. And he arrived and he had his robes in the trunk. So he put on the robes and performed a ritual. And out of the blue sky, thunder and rain. I'm serious. And then 5 minutes later, blue sky again. And he had performed and he performed with the band who was there. And then that was Rick, typical Rick.
Vincent, can you put the picture up again so we can see it more closely? Or keep it up for a few moments.
I have many, but that's one of them.
Thank you very much, Vincent.
Thanks for sharing. That's wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, there's nobody else with their hand up, but if anyone else wants to share any other wonderful memories of Rick, that
Please,
would be wonderful.
各位中国学者，请不怕羞。
Liu Xun has a word.
Liu Xun, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, and thank you, David, and also Eleanor for doing this. I think it's very, very proper, and I just want to share sort of my encounter with Rick. Nothing really that engaging as Vincent just told us about the magical powers he has. My first encounter with Rick was actually not in person, but on paper in a book. I was studying at USC at the time as a graduate student, working with Gary Seaman, and one of the assignments was to read actually David Johnson's book, operatic, what is it, the ritual opera and operatic ritual. And Rick's chapter in there was actually a structural and case study of structural analysis and case study of the Mulian. And I was just floored because it's so different from all these other chapters dealing with the representation of the ritual and in Taoist literature. Never seen that. And that's just in early 1990s while I was in Los Angeles. And so ever since I thought, oh, this is really such an insightful, really sort of a, very unusual kind of reading that I have had up to that point. And it was a very important moment for me because I think that later on, of course, I began to read the other, I think one of our colleagues mentioned the Taoist body. This is probably David. And of course, after that, and I went into the sort of a direction of studying of the body and all that. But the ritual part of it and also the analysis never quite left. And then really, later on, when I worked with our late colleague Mei Li in Wuhan, studying the Hunan Xinhua migrant Taoist in Wuhan, and when I came into these, these sort of analysis again, and then find them to be very, very useful in understanding the rituals that they perform in the city. And also on the other side, and I really I had good fortune of working with two of Rick's students, Vincent and also David. And then, of course, I have occasions to watch actually Rick in action at Harvard and these different places. And, you know, when often he would pull you to the side and then tell you or ask you questions that you have to keep thinking about. And then encouragement that it really kind of, you know, was very, very kind. So I want to share that. Just thank you.
Thank you. If I may say a couple of things myself, I did Chinese studies in Italy and in the early 90s, and we already, one of the books that we had to read for our religious studies of China was the Taoist Body. So I wanted to mention how that was important, was already recognized as a really important book in the field, but also that too, just like Yushun just said, really inspired me to work on the body and on physical experiences and physical practices and physiological practices, and then Neidan. So I think I just want to say basically what everybody else has said, which is Rick had so many wonderful intuitions in all sorts of areas that really allow us to be inspired to do research in each one of these fields. And that's the legacy really that he has left us, so many areas to open and explore. So yeah, I want to thank him and thank everybody here for sharing all of these wonderful experiences. Anyone else?
Thank you, Elena. Anyone else? You can just speak directly if that's more comfortable for you. 中国学者，你们想说发言的话，请直接说话，谢谢。
我说两句吧，听得到吗？
听得到，
可以，
我是山东大学国武，对这个我想说两句，因为中国学者没有发言，对这个跟施泽文教授先生交集比较多的时候呢，是2000年前后，我在香港中文大学读书的时候，当时呢我是学生，施先生呢当时是李志天教授邀请他去中文大学去讲课，但是呢因为当时这个道教的学生比较少，所以施先生当时去中文大学讲课呢，实际上是讲《诗经》，讲那个《诗经》。但施先生他就觉得这个很寂寞，他就跟我说呢，邀请我每个星期呢可以到他家里去喝咖啡，然后呢讨论一些问题。实际上我去学习了。当时呢，因为我受的训练呢是中国大陆这个道教研究的这个训练，都比较注重思想这一块。对，所以当时跟施先生呢还有个争论，因为大陆呢，中国大陆认为道教的仪式、道教的行为呢是没有太多价值的。这个，我是拿这种观点来这个跟施泽文先生讨论的。但施先生跟我讲这不对，他说道教的仪式、道教的这个行为也很重要。这个你看看，他说道章里面2/3的这个典籍呢都是仪式的，都是经典的，你能说它不重要吗？对，所以当时我从香港回到中国大陆以后呢，这个我在师范大学讲课也好，这个跟学者的交往也好，我因为大陆不重视这一块，所以我一直就很这个强调这一块。这些年来呢，应该说是这个大陆的年轻学者呢比较重视对仪式、对行为的研究。我想是不是受到施先生的影响呢？我不敢那么直接，但是我想是一定是有他的影响在的。对，还有另外一个呢，就是做仪式呢，做道教呢，他强调呢要做一些调查，田野的调查，要亲自去见识。所以我当时在师范大学讲课呢，也强调这一点。现在呢，很多年轻人呢也很重视这一块。我想说呢，这个也可能算是施先生呢对中国道教研究界吧一个影响。对，我就说那么多，谢谢。
非常感谢。
郭老师，谢谢。
Professor Gil raises his hand up.
Yes, Gil, please.
Thank you, everybody for joining us and organizing and so on. I first met Schipper. I was already on my way to the US to start my PhD, and we were stopped over in the Netherlands, and I went to Leiden, and he invited me to a very kind lunch to discuss my future work. And about a decade later, I was invited for a reason I never quite figured out. I was invited to sort of to the conference celebrating the publication of the Project Daozang in Chicago, where I presented actually about the Huangshu Bodui. And I, having now heard John's words and David Pullman, I remember that almost everything I do is kind of more of a kind of elaborating on footnotes. Schipper sort of left me his work, saying, I never quite understood this. And I can go and read the text and I say, oh, okay, now I get it. But he sort of said it in his footnote anyway. And some of you know, so the two projects I'm working on right now, one of them is about caves. And again, I mean, of course, it's his work, really. So I'm just kind of trying to understand what he's kind of writing about. And for a few years, some of you know, I've been working on his book called Masters of Time, which I thought was a really clever title until I realized I'd read it. That's actually a sentence from his Taoist body. He calls it Taoist, the Master of Time. And I kind of, it's so in my mind that I kind of forgot it's from a book. And I thought, I'm so clever to invent this. And then I reread it and said, oh, okay, that's just a line from the book. Thank you.
Thank you, Gil. Anyone else would like to speak? The floor is open. 各位客人想说话，请说。
Well, it looks that maybe we have exhausted the period of public sharing, and then what we would like, unless, oh, Ken, would you like to say
Elena,
something?
just if I may just mention, I think it's in a sense our duty to keep this ball rolling, not just to discuss amongst ourselves, but to do our best to spread our understanding of what Schipper's contributions have been. I'm very happy to be attending this event tonight because I've taken lots of notes for a talk I'm supposed to give tomorrow at the Taoist College in Singapore about Schipper's contribution to Taoist studies. But I hope that all of us can do similar sorts of talks locally or in academic settings, and maybe consider putting together a collection of essays in the future on that topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Ken.
I'm sending everybody again the Chinese religions website where this talk, for those of you who have joined us later, this event today is being recorded and we will post it there as soon as it's, as soon as it's ready to be posted. So that will be a beginning a conversation. But of course, I am sure actually probably the Schipper's students are already thinking about some kind of commemoration in writing, but I hope that this event will help maybe spur this community to come together. And as Vincent at the beginning asked, we will share, if you're all fine with this, the list of people who were here today with everybody. And so that you know who was here, who spoke, and also who is interested in all of this and the legacy of Schipper, so that we can maybe continue to foster this community. Thank you, Ken.
Okay, Ellen, I think.
Kim Ji-yoon is wants to speak.
Yes, one more. Go ahead.
Go ahead,
please.
Hi, hello. I am Ji-yoon Kim, work at Seoul National University, Korea. I just want to thank you, and I just want to speak a little bit because the Professor Kristofer Schipper inspires even Korean study Taoist text. It was 1998 when I read Kristofer Schipper's Taoist Body. Actually was translated version in English. This book gave me a deep impression that organic correlation between nature, society, and the human body in Taoist tradition. On top of that, I can glimpse the verses of Taoist scriptures are so beautiful and enchanting. The Book of Yellow Court, everyone knows, Huang Tingjing, inspired me to explore Taoist texts that describe the inner space of the human body and unification of the inner and outer world. It led me to study on Sixth Dynasty period Taoism. I've studied in Kyoto University and never met him in person. Thus, it was my honor to receive Professor Schipper's comments on my article uploaded on Academia Edu, which is about evolving great Cavan scripture, Da Dong San Jing, and its history of reinterpretation from the 4th century to the 19th century. At this moment, I just want to cherish this opportunity to share his marvelous inspiration on Chinese studies as well as Taoist studies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kim.
So if nobody else wants to speak publicly, we will end this sort of public sharing and thank all of those who share their words with us. To conclude the commemoration, we will now, if you would like to, if it's really late where you are, or if you would like to leave this meeting, it's this sort of concludes the public and sort of more formal sharing event, and we would like to start to try this experiment of breakout rooms so that we can bring people together randomly. We will not choose, but randomly put people together to share maybe more personal stories or in a smaller group. Again, this will give us a chance to continue informally sharing stories and thoughts about Professor Schipper. And again, everybody should speak in whatever language feels most comfortable. If you wish, however, if you wish to leave the event now, you can do so. If you do not leave, then you will be directed to join a breakout room. Once you join the breakout room, you can at any time also leave that breakout room and leave whenever you like. You can leave the whole event, or you can leave the breakout room and be back with in this larger room, and you can be redirected to another room if you want to join a different group of people. So we're going to experiment with this form of meeting, virtual meeting. And so this concludes the formal portion of the event. Again, a recording will be uploaded on the SSCR website. And on behalf of the Global Studies Forum and the Society for the Study of Chinese Religions, many thanks to all who spoke, and thank you all for participating. And now Jingyu will say a few words in Chinese.
Oh yeah, 非常感谢各位的发言。所以接下来呢，我们要进行最后一个环节。在这个环节里，我们将模拟的是一个非正式的见面，就像我们平时在会场外的走廊里面遇到之后，会展开那种随意轻松的谈话一样。所以我们会随机分组，每组大概会有5到6位朋友，以便大家有机会进行更进一步的分享。您可以自由的去到不同的分组的房间，只需要退回到主会议厅，告诉我们，我们就会再将您分到另外的房间里面去。所以到此呢，已经是我们这次会议的尾声。你也可以选择直接退出会议。如果您有任何疑问，请随时打开麦克风向我们提问。另外，在会议结束之后，我们将会在那个 SSCR 的网站上上传我们这次会议的录像。再次感谢大家的参与，谢谢。Okay, so I'm gonna do breakout rooms now. So
thank you again to everyone.
Yeah, go ahead, David. Say a few
Just
more words.
Thank you again to everyone, and we will randomly sort folks into breakout rooms and see how this goes. And until we meet again.
Yeah, until we meet again. It was wonderful to be able to organize this, and wonderful to hear all your fantastic stories of Kristofer.